We're now going to work on the 150 air compressor. This is our oldest model. These are 8, 9 years old. There's maybe 100 or so left in the field, and they're going away. They were great for the True Green project for small equipment stuff, but as we get bigger, we need the bigger air compressors like the 300. But for those of you that still have one of these, I'm going to tell you the general maintenance on it, and I'm also going to show you a little trick to make this more usable for yourself. Now this air compressor kicks on from dead empty. It takes about 8 to 10 minutes to air that tank up. It goes to 125 pounds of air and quits. When you're using the air, it drops down to 90, it kicks back on, goes up to 125 and quits. Well, it won't work a 1-inch impact more than about 1.5 lugs on a big truck with a 1-inch impact. But I'm going to show you a little trick to make that work better for you. This is your control valve. This is the mechanical side. It's a 2-piece side. One is the shut off, one is the start time. This is the electric switch. This is from the factory. Looks just like this one right here. You cannot get it to go more than 125 pounds air pressure. Now, I don't want you to crank it up to 150 pounds air pressure because that won't solve your problem, but it won't hurt to crank it up a little bit. So what you want to do is you take this one off and you buy this one that you can buy at Napa. It's adjustable. You put it in, and now you can crank it up to about safely to around 140 without causing any internal problems or any issues with the compressor itself. But that still won't get you more than 2 lug nuts before you run out of air. The top pressure is not your issue, it's the start pressure that's your issue. A 1-inch impact, all air tools won't operate below 90 pounds of air pressure. So when it hits 90 with this little pump, it'll drop down another 10 or 15 pounds of pressure, so that means your air tools don't work at all. So what you want to do is you want to crank the start time up from 90. What we do in this shop here, we crank them up to around 120. So that means it shuts off at 140. It starts back at 120. So even if you're running your air impact, it'll only drop another 10, 15 pounds. That still keeps it above the 90 to make the tools work. Now, it still won't do a full set of lug nuts on a semi because your tank is not that big. But it will make it more user-friendly, and now you can do 3 or 4 lug nuts, and you can go from the stock setup. It takes 35 to 45 minutes to change a tire to now doing it in about 15. Because it makes this pump more usable. So I suggest you do that. If it ever comes through my shop, I send all trucks back out of here with this done to it. If you happen to get one that's not that way, real simple setup, takes you 20 minutes, half hour to adjust it. Now it makes your pump a whole lot more user-friendly. All right, here's another common problem with these. If you ever have one that's a little slow at building up air pressure, or it gets to a certain point, it gets up to say 80 pounds or something and quits. This is a real simple fix. This is an adjustable belt because the motor and the compressor are solid mounted. You need to be able to adjust the belt. Now this factory belt should go 2.5 years before it needs adjusted, but it's real simple. If you can look through the window here while it's running, if that belt's moving more than 1 inch, it needs tightened. It's real simple to tighten. You just take it apart and you take links off of it. Take a couple links off of it, put it back together. All this is explained in the book, but a lot of times the book's not available. So shorten it a couple links. You start out by putting it on the small motor pulley first. You roll it onto the big pulley. If you can just roll it on there easy, that's too loose. If you have to take a pry bar or screwdriver to put it on, that's too tight. But you should really have to struggle to get it on there to make it tight enough. Now, a lot of guys will buy a Napa rubber V-belt, and that's good to get you by until you can get a new belt. But a V-belt will stretch out faster than these will, and you'll have to replace them every 5 or 6 months. So it's always best to have this belt, but in an emergency you can use a V-belt. These belts are available through Imperial or VanAir, either one, and they're real simple to use and they last a long time. Now in the 150 air compressors, the generators on these are below this battery behind the cover. If you ever have a generator that doesn't come on when you turn the switch on, then 9 times out of 10 it's this capacitor. It's right here off the back of this generator. You have to pull that white cover there off and you can get to it. If you have an open bed truck with this unit in the back of it, this capacitor probably goes out once or twice a year easy. It's real simple because all it is they get moisture corroded and rusted. You have to call VanAir or the purchasing department to get these. It's real simple to change. You just pull it out, plug it in. 9 out of 10 times, that's all it is. There is one other thing though that you need to do. When you pull this off of here, if you zoom in on this right here, you can see this is burnt. Now, I say 9 out of 10 times because in the 9 years we've been using this style unit, we've only had to replace 3 of these that burnt like this. We don't know what happened or why, but when you're pulling the capacitor off to change the capacitor, always look to make sure that it's not burnt. If it's burnt, then you need a generator. If it's not burnt, it's just the capacitor. It has never ever been the wiring harness fail. It is always the capacitor or the generator itself. All right, if you ever have trouble with this battery staying charged, make sure you check it to see if it's charging. If it ever fails to charge, you're not getting voltage charging it. It is not this alternator back here. This alternator back here is the welder DC current that runs your welder, and it's your 12 volt, 24 volt that runs your charging system. So it cannot charge this battery. This battery is charged off the motor itself, just like your lawnmower at home is. The stator in it, or magneto, whichever you want to call it, that's how it charges this battery. So if it's ever not charging, it has a voltage regulator on it, which basically is a rectifier. It looks just like this. It's bolted down here on the side of this plastic cover, and that way air cools it to keep it cool. It has 3 sides to it. The center post is the stator that charges this battery. The 2 outside posts are the 12 volt, 24 volt side for your charging system on your control panel. 9 times out of 10, if it's not working properly, if you will look at this here, this is aluminum. It's bolted to this plastic so it's not grounded. So we have to run a ground strap from here to the block with a steel strap, and steel and aluminum don't necessarily get along real well. So what happens is this will get oxidized, it get a little rust on it, it won't hold a ground. So before you go out and buy a new rectifier for it, clean the ground strap real good, put it back together. 8 out of 10 times that'll fix it. In the 9 years we've been using this style machine, we've replaced less than 2 of these. Usually clean it, make sure it's got a good ground first. If that doesn't fix it, then you'll need to replace this. But 9 times out of 10, it's fixable by just cleaning the ground strap on it. But just remember, this is charged like your lawnmower. So you can't plug in accessories to this battery. It doesn't have enough power to pull anything. At its best, this stator will put out 13.4 to 13.6, 13.8 maybe volts at max. So if you're putting any kind of draw on this, this needs 12.2 to 12.4 to keep charged. So you put any other draw to this system at all, it'll run this battery dead. Never tie anything to these batteries. Okay, still being on the 150 air compressor, there's 2 versions of it. There's what we call a new style and an old style air compressor. The big difference is the compressor itself didn't really change anything. The breathers on the pump was a little bit different, and that's it. The control panels are what changed. This is the old style control panel. the difference between this one and the new style control panel, it's obvious. It's a little bigger. It has your welding leads separate. On this style control panel, your welding leads come out here, and so does your 12 volt, 24 volt side. So you have 12 volt, 24 volt, and welder all coming out of this connector, which is a problem if you're not careful, because this plug-in right here is what activates the welder. It's on your control knob for your welding rod, and that's where all your controls are. If you ever have one that's malfunctioning or the welding's not working, make sure these pins are clean, because they have a tendency to get corrosion, dust, and dirt in them, and they don't make good contact. It will not operate. So if you have one welder not working, clean these pins, and usually that'll fix it. We done away with this particular control panel when we went to the new one. For that reason is, if you were to forget and leave this plugged in, no matter what these switches are on, you're putting out welding. You burn up all your lights in your trailers or whatever it is you're testing or whatever it is you're hooked to. If you're hooked to a battery, you can blow a battery up. So we done away with this because of the simple fact that it was just too dangerous and too many problems. When we went to the new control panel, the biggest difference with that control panel is, old one will jump start a dead battery, the new one will not. The reason it will not is because it is a safety. And you know how right now safety is involved in everything. Well, with all the electronic vehicles that are out there now, if you jump start with one of these and put too much voltage to it, you burn out the electronics. And on a Sprinter, in 3 seconds it blows the headlights, in 30 seconds it blows the control module. So they done away with it. They don't do that no more. They make a safety device in this. It's called a diode, that when you plug this into a battery, it reads the battery to know what battery it has, what voltage and amperage it will take, so that it won't overcharge it or blow it up or burn the electronics out of a vehicle. But it's aggravating when you plug it in and the voltage reads 1.9 and you got the generator turned on, nothing's happening. It's not that it's putting out 1.9 volts. That's how many volts are in the battery, and it's not enough volts for this to read. It has to have 2.5 volts or more in it to read to kick the diode on. So it knows if you're on a lawnmower battery or semi battery or dual batteries or even 24 volt. So the safety in this will stop you from jumping start a dead battery. So we give you a jump pack in all of our trucks now for that purpose. The jump pack just needs to be plugged in long enough to pull this machine into having enough voltage to read the charging system so that it can come on. Once it comes on, you can take your jump pack off. The jump packs we used to furnish would only jump start a single battery truck. Now we come out with a new jump pack that will jump start a 4 battery semi. All right, now on the 150s, the last thing I want to go over on this is the service schedule on these. The service schedule on this air compressor is once a year or every 100 hours, whichever comes first. Now, if you're in a good location, then you're going to have to change oil in a couple times a year, because you're going to do more than 100 hours worth of work a year. So, but just remember, at least once a year or every 100 hours. We are working on a scheduling program, just like your truck is. It will pop up as an email when it's due on its yearly, and then you'll have to maintain the hourly one. But it does need to be done. It's the same thing. You get the packages through Imperial. It comes with all the filters and kits. That information will be available to you real soon on the internet also. It has all the part numbers, has belts, all the parts that we discussed earlier that you can buy through Imperial will all be on there with part numbers for you to get that way. You need to understand the PDC is your best friend. Not me, I can't help you. I build the trucks. But the purchasing department handles all your needs, and if you're having issues mechanically with them, if you can't get help through somebody, if you go through the PDC, they will get help for you. They will make sure that somebody calls you back or somebody gets a hold of you or gives you the information. But as far as all the parts and stuff that you need, if you go through the PDC, they will take care of you. That's their job, to make sure you guys are handled. If you go directly through Imperial on something, like you want to buy the kits or something through this and your manager just tells you to do it, you can go through Imperial. If you contact Imperial before 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it will go out in today's mail. Where if you go through the VanAir system, it might take 3 to 5 days for you to get. If you go through the Imperial system, it will go out in that day's mail.